Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes podcast for Out of Frame. I am your host, Sean Malone, creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame. Here, as always, with Jennifer Maffasanti, the communications director for Libertas Institute in Utah, and of course, Paul Nelson, our senior marketing manager and Out of Frame Shorts editor. How are you guys doing today?
I'm so tired.
Yeah. I guess I should say
it's just really kicking my
we
backside right now.
Not good. We are recording this the day after daylight savings, and it is kind of brutal. And it's at least for me, it's sort of towards the end of the day, and I'm feeling it. Paul, are you feeling it?
Yeah, the time change is not affecting me nearly as much. I've been getting over a cold that was passed on to me by my two boys, and I thought I had gotten over it yesterday, but nope. Today it came back with a vengeance, and so I'm gonna bring the energy today. But I feel like after this, I'm gonna just take a nice nap.
That would be nice. Well, I got some more stuff to do after this, but I have some really good news though. I have some weird good news. For those of you who don't know, and that's actually probably most people in this audience, the reason that I was out a couple weeks ago and for a couple weeks was because my father-in-law died. And that's been really difficult for a lot of reasons. I've been like maybe a little bit more and more inclined to tell some of that story in replies in the YouTube comments and things like that. And I talk about it in the Discord. If you guys want to ask me about it, I'm happy to talk about it in Discord, and maybe especially in the sort of backstage part of Discord for the Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. But the one thing that has been really, really difficult about this, and this isn't the first time that I've sort of seen it. This is the first time I've dealt with it personally. But it's not the first time I've seen it happen to friends, is like my father-in-law's passwords were not recorded anywhere like that we could get access to. So for the last few weeks, we've been dealing with, trying to figure out all of his accounts, like bank accounts. He had a Coinbase account. Like retirement stuff, like there's all those kinds of things that come up when you die, and it's very, very difficult if there's not some central, like centralized location where you can access all that stuff. Now, of course, it's like insecure to do that, so people always worry about it. But like one piece of advice, tell someone, like loved ones, whoever, tell somebody this stuff, because it actually really is going to matter. The other thing though is like he had a password keeper software, but it was local. It wasn't like LastPass. So for weeks we had no idea how to get into it, and finally yesterday we found the master password for that. Holy cow, that has been like an enormous weight off. Like you guys can't even imagine like how big of a deal it is to like suddenly be able to access, like, again, it's like everything. It's social accounts. It's like all of the things. Oh my God. That is like the best news that I've had in a couple weeks, being able to get into this stuff. It's weird because it's like, it's all kind of morbid and like centered around a really terrible thing. But like at the same time, oh my God, like being able to get into that just made my day yesterday. It's been tough otherwise. I don't know.
That's great news, and definitely a hopeful note to get to help you guys with the time.
I mean, we're now into the phase of everything where we've got to start contacting people. We've got to like start getting in touch with the bank and getting in touch with hospitals and previous doctors' offices and stuff like that. So having access to this stuff is like, it's just such a game changer for it, because otherwise you got to basically like send death certificates to people, and like however long that takes, it just like the process will take forever, and it makes a huge difference. So sorry, I mean, I don't want that to be like a downer, because it's actually a really positive thing for me right now. But like, how are you guys doing? Like, Jen, what's other than daylight savings time, like how's Utah treating you? I know I know you had dinner with somebody important to Out of Frame recently.
Yes, I did. So, for those who don't know, the full length Out of Frame videos, we use a video editor who's a contractor. He's remote from Atlanta, and his name is Arash Iram. And if you want to, get some insight into Arash at all, I would encourage you to watch the Out of Frame episode on Batman and
but yeah,
and the Joker. Yes. So he actually lived here in Utah, real close to me. And so I had Arash over for dinner last night. It was delightful. He brought cake from a local Cuban bakery. It was wonderful. So
that sounds fantastic.
That was it was lovely. I made pasta. It was just nice. And
I feel like I haven't ever really gotten to hang out with Arash in person a ton, because whenever he has come to Atlanta, it's been kind of for work stuff. So we do a lot of work and then, hang out a little bit, but it's not really the same thing. So that sounds awesome to me.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. The kids were so excited to show him their drone flying skill. He and my husband geeked out over vintage cars. It was wonderful.
But speaking of drones, oh my God, Jen,
yes,
because Arash sent it to me. Have you guys seen this bowling alley drone video?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. That is crazy.
Because I thought for sure with that video that was going to be because with drones, especially the nicer ones, you can set a flight path, right? Like you can code it to do a certain flight path. And I thought for sure this was it was obviously a drone, but I thought for sure it was something where they had programmed it to do that flight path. Because there's also it's not just the flying of the drone, but there's also actors or probably just bowling alley patrons and stuff, timed to kind of do this shot at this point, or the one guy who's kind of doing the Big Lebowski thing, and which is fantastic. That's really great. But that was a guy manually flying the drone. That is bonkers to me. That is so
blowing.
It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. I mean, that guy is going to get a whole lot of work after this. So congratulations to that guy. He is going to be in high demand. But, oh my God.
I'm a little disappointed, Jen, that you didn't cater In-N-Out Burger for your dinner with Arash.
Yeah, look.
Oh my goodness.
People have strong feelings about In-N-Out Burger. I am super meh on In-N-Out Burger. I don't understand why it has the hype that it has. And I know that this is blasphemous to a lot of my former LA neighbors and friends, but I don't really get it. It's fine.
Yeah. In-N-Out was hyped up to me so much. There was very recently some news story from I don't know, Colorado or something like that, where they opened a new In-N-Out Burger, and there was hours long line for the drive-through, and I'd never had it before. I'd never experienced this life-altering hamburger until just the other day, and I got it, and I sat down, and it was fine.
Yeah,
it was exactly. A fast food burger.
That's exactly how I feel about it. It was fine. It was. It wasn't bad. Efficient. It was fine.
The idea that In-N-Out Burger is just fine is kind of offensive. The ingredients that they use. It's you look back behind the counter and they're actually peeling heads of lettuce. I don't think a head of lettuce has ever been in McDonald's the last 30 years.
I'm not comparing In-N-Out to McDonald's, though. I'm comparing In-N-Out to Shake Shack. I'm comparing it to Five Guys. I'm comparing it to, if you live in the Pacific Northwest, Burgerville, which is fantastic. Like we can talk about the Whataburger in Texas, or frankly, if you live in LA, I'd rather have Fat Burger. So this is like entirely blasphemous for me. I would much rather have Fat Burger if I was in LA than But also Atlanta. If you guys haven't been to Atlanta is a burger city, and like there are so many great places. And they're not the same. They're not like, I'm not talking about like the fast food burgers here, but like there are so many great places here. Just like Grindhouse or Bad Daddy's alone, I would take over any In-N-Out I've ever had. So fine.
Well, that's a different category. I do have a ranking. I do have a ranking. I have a ranking. This is national-ish burger chains. Number 5, Five Guys. I think it's a little overrated. Every time I eat there, I feel like I'm about to die. But it's good. It's like a good death, I guess. 4. 4 is Shake Shack. It's pretty good, but you spend like $30 and you get a small burger and fry. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Shake Shack is tragically overpriced. I'll give you that.
3, this is going to cause some controversy. McDonald's. If McDonald's is done right, which is increasingly rare nowadays, it's on a different level. It hits different, as the youth say. It just hits different, and the way they dial in their soda, they got it down to a science.
And yet the fries, man, have taken a huge hit. First of all, used to be the best.
Yeah,
sad.
The fries, disappointing. It is sad. We need to make McDonald's fries great again.
And then I feel like we would be remiss without talking about shake machines, because come on,
they're always broken.
Come on,
they're always broken. Number 2, In-N-Out Burger. Now, you guys have a lot. You're very meh about it, but if you give me a double, extra toast, grilled onions, you're gonna have yourself a good night with the little animal style fries and a Neapolitan shake. That's a good night out on the West Coast. I mean, you can have your Grindhouses, your Bad Daddies, but that's pretty good. And number 1, this actually supplanted In-N-Out Burger for me in the last few years. But number 1, best burger joint, national-ish chain, Culver's. It is. Their butter burgers are amazing, and their ingredients on the same level as In-N-Out, but it's just better. It's like a combination of Five Guys and Shake Shack and In-N-Out put together,
right?
And then you can get cheese curds as a side.
I'm with you on that, except for I have no idea where to go to get a Culver's burger.
It's in Atlanta.
Is
there one in Atlanta?
Yeah, there's some in Atlanta.
Where?
They're building one down the street from me.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, I don't have like the map memorized, but I do know that there's one in Snellville. Apparently there's one over on the other side of town. But yeah, Culver's is there in Atlanta. And I will agree with Culver's as your number 1.
Oh, all right.
Culver's is good food.
You heard it here first, folks. We spontaneously found our way into a burger ranking. So, but
definitive burger ranking,
according to Paul. Anyway, I would change that ranking, but I'm not. But I didn't come prepared. I didn't bring in a plan for ranking nationalish burger chains.
It's funny. It's not like I planned this. This is just an ongoing list in my brain.
Well, look, I think we all knew that. All right, so this would have been a better segue if I had started from where I first started talking about stuff with this. But we've got 2 episodes we're going to talk about today. For the main episode, or two movies we're going to talk about on today's episode. For the main body of the show, we're going to talk about this new movie that's on Netflix. It's on Netflix, right? I'm blanking on which streaming service, but I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix, called I Care a Lot, starring Rosamund Pike and Peter Dinklage. We'll get into that movie in a second. And then for supporters of the show on Patreon or Subscribestar, so that's patreon.com/outofframeshow or subscribestar.com/outofframeshow. You can see that on the side of your screen here if you're watching the video version, but if you're just listening, it's those links. But for our subscribers and supporters, we're going to actually talk about the Disney movie Maleficent, which is going to sound like a little bit of a weird flip for it, but the thinking on this was that like there are a handful of movies that we've seen lately, and maybe in particular like the upcoming Cruella de Vil movie, which of course we haven't seen yet. We've only seen trailers for it, but where it's really they're not even anti-hero movies, but they're movies that rewrite the villain as the hero. And that was sort of the connections. We kind of wanted to talk about movies that kind of turned the tables in terms of like turning the villain into a protagonist. So I Care a Lot does that, to some degree here. And I think we all three of us have had a chance to talk about this movie a little bit, but, and I think we all have a little bit of a varying take. So I guess let me start by giving you a little bit of the plot. It's basically the gist of the movie is that there's a woman who is running a sort of a scam to take control over essentially get power of attorney over a bunch of elderly people. And in doing so, she has access to their bank accounts, to their safety deposit boxes, even to their homes, right? And she can sell their houses and collect all of that money. But the way that she gets this power over them is actually by working as an officer of the court to some degree. So she goes into to a civil court under a judge, and she convinces the judge that this old lady or whoever is like, mentally incompetent to make decisions for herself. And she usually tells some horrible sob story about how, terrible condition she's in and how she's being mistreated and how she doesn't have any family to help her out, blah, blah, blah. And then she gets power of attorney over her and then, does terrible things, puts her in a nursing home, sells the house, collects the assets, goes into the bank accounts, does all that kind of stuff. So having recently had a very, very awful experience with hospitals and healthcare and everything else, I wanted to watch this movie. My wife and I watched this movie hoping to get a little bit of catharsis out of it. Like we kind of watched this movie going like, oh man, somebody mistreating elderly people. Let's watch this and watch them get the comeuppance that they deserve. And boy, were we kind of mistaken about that. So this will get into spoilers like right away, but the comeuppance that you expect when you start with such a horrible, horrible character is that they will be punished in some way for being horrible, horrible people. And in this case, that generally speaking didn't happen, even though it totally should have happened, especially because she, like the person that she did the worst damage to, at least, the plot, the main, plot of the movie is Peter Dinklage's mom in the movie. And Peter Dinklage plays a Russian mob boss, basically. So you would think that Russian mob boss, you would think that this was going to be John Wick, basically. You'd think that oh man, you hurt my mother. I'm coming after you with everything I got. Yeah. Then it kind of fell flat for me. So I don't know. Paul, you had totally different thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this movie was one of the scariest movies I have seen in a long time. And I wouldn't even classify this as a horror movie.
No.
The idea that someone you never meet and through the courts, through the power of the government, through shady deals with doctors, can basically take over your life, control who sees you, control what you can do, and basically take everything you've worked for your entire life. That is deeply unsettling. So where I think that in of itself was worthy of a watch. And Rosamund Pike's performance in this was just first class.
She
She
was very good.
plays
Yeah.
her character Marla Grayson is a literal psychopath, but she's such a psychopath that when she is confronted by Peter Dinklage and he tells her, "I'm going to kill you, and then I found your mom and I'm going to kill her," and she said, "I don't care. She's a psychopath." And
Yeah.
this just that is the kind of person you're dealing with, is someone who doesn't have a grasp on reality and what she's doing to hurt people. But so where I had a different take on this whole movie than Sean was that I don't think it was necessarily about Marla Grayson. Obviously, she's the main character, but I don't think it. I wasn't watching this expecting her to get a comeuppance, and well, she eventually did. But it seems to me that the story was a take on capitalism and how capitalism enables psychopaths to destroy one of the most helpless communities segments of our society, which is the elderly.
Yeah.
And when you look at it that way, it is very scary, very, very, very hard to deal with. And just this is one of those few movies that I just keep thinking about it, just randomly. The acting performance is great. Just the thought of anybody I love or know going through this, or myself, it's just unsettling.
So the capitalism take, I think, is interesting, and I do think that it is, like, both characters, both Peter Dinklage and Marla. Peter Dinklage's character's named Roman Lunyoff, I think, but he's going under pseudonyms anyway, just because he's like hiding from people, or whatever. But Roman is also somebody who made presented in the movie as somebody who made a great living. Hurting people, basically. So both of the two leads in the movie are terrible. However, in the ranking of like who's worse in this case, right? Like, we're actually supposed to be rooting for the mob boss, because she is like attacking his mother, first of all, and we've already seen her, like, we've already set up her character as having done horrible things to other people. In fact, when we first meet her character, she is in court telling this story about how this man, neglected his own mom, and how she needed to step in. Meanwhile, this guy is pleading, saying, like, this woman has stepped into their lives and taken over everything, and she's being, manipulative, and she's terrible and whatever. And he's right, obviously, but the judge doesn't believe him, because the judge believes the person with more, a higher level of credentials, a higher level of respect within the court system, somebody who he's worked with in the past and everything else. So, like, she is a monster. She's an absolute monster of a psychopathic human being. Like, she is, I mean, really terrifying in that sense. And we're supposed to be rooting. I mean, at least I would hope you are anyway, sort of rooting against her. But even, the person that she's up against is like a worse monster, right? Or at least that's kind of what he's supposed to be as well. And yet, I got to say, also, his henchmen are terrible in every possible way.
They're the worst.
All right. Anyway, Jen, give me your thoughts before I talk about henchmen in this, because I have to talk about that a little bit. Like, he's the worst mob boss I've ever seen in a lot of ways.
This movie was upsetting to me. I mean, for all of the reasons that Paul described, but also from a storytelling perspective. Like, why is this movie? Nobody says anything. There's no character development. Like,
Zero.
There's zero changes happen. And it is deeply unsatisfying from a narrative standpoint. Like, why are we like, this is not why we watch movies. This is not why we tell each other stories. This is awful. And it was It was
Yeah, look,
rough.
and again, we watched it specifically to to feel that sort of comeuppance a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
look, I'm not going to go into all like the sort of morbid, like terrible details about like the last few weeks and stuff that I had leading up to watching this movie, but like we dealt with a situation where like a hospital like grossly mistreated my father-in-law, and like there was, I don't know what is legally actionable or whatever else, but like there was clear negligence. Like there were all these terrible things that happened leading up to this that like frankly make me super angry. Also, and again, this is like not really something I want to get into at the moment, but like it made me sort of even rethink some aspects of what I've been, it's not no secret that like I've been relatively critical of COVID policy for the last year even, and I've made a lot of those criticisms clear on the show and everything else. But there was something that I did not consider in a lot of what I've criticized over the last year, and that is the role that that lack of visitation has played in a lot of this stuff. Like there are a lot of things, and I think this plays into the movie a lot too, where there's a lot of things that happened to my family, where if there had been somebody at the hospital, if there had been somebody in the room, they could have talked to doctors, they could have talked to nurses, and and explained some of the medical history they didn't have. They could have explained some of the like reasons why you would not be thinking the way that they were thinking, and actually like diagnose something differently than they did. And then maybe more importantly to all of that, there'd be somebody to advocate on behalf would have been somebody to advocate on behalf of my father-in-law when he wasn't getting dialysis on time, or when he wasn't, getting bathed frequently, things like that we did not have the ability to do when we were stuck remotely, because all we could do is call and listen to whatever the nurses said, or whatever the doctors said. And that plays into this movie a lot, because all of these people, the first thing that Marla does is stick these elderly people in a nursing home that is in on the grift, and so the nursing home that she sends them to immediately takes away their phone. They lock them down in the back of the nursing home. They don't allow visitation. They don't allow family members to interact with their loved ones, right? And of course she does that, because that's the only shield she has, essentially, from having everybody figure out that this is all a scam. So it's like a super essential part of her scam. But it's also like, for me, it was like very personal, and it was very like, this is exactly what, like the essence of this is exactly what I've just experienced. And it's horrifying. And then basically she wins, essentially. I mean, yes, there's a denouement that we can talk about, but like for the most part, she wins. She turns this, sorry, I'll just skip to like the biggest spoiler. Like, she beats Peter Dinklage's character in this. Like, she literally, like, she escapes death multiple times, where I don't see how any human being could actually escape death, which is crazy. And then secondly, she ends up like actually putting Peter Dinklage in the hospital, and then doing the same thing to him, scamming the court system. He's a John Doe, right? Because he doesn't have a real ID or whatever. So she immediately ends up, with power of attorney over him. And then instead of sort of having some way to turn that around on her again, Peter Dinklage ultimately offers her a partnership where they build out an entire network, a big multi-billion-dollar corporation. And this gets, I think, Paul, gets to your anti-capitalism point. They build a big multi-billion-dollar corporation around this same scam, And so it's not what I paid to see, like that's not what I wanted coming into this. But life doesn't always give you what you want, I guess. So I guess that's on me. But Paul, I think it makes a lot of sense for your capitalism critique.
Yeah, and it's for me, the biggest frustration was so the way they portrayed the judge was that he was actually impartial and wasn't in on the grift. And that's obviously part of the why I immediately think of these people are obviously going after our system of capitalism and all that stuff. But I think where they just get it wrong is that the only reason this is possible is because the government has control over this. It's not.
Yeah.
It's there. We've gotten to this point where we can have this stuff happen, and there's nothing you could do about it. You see this with the Britney Spears situation, which is very different, but also shares some similarities. And it's not just capitalism's fault. There's a lot of reasons why something like this could happen, and the government is enabling it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, and this isn't the only kind of scam that you can run in that sense. You know, I mean, there's a lot of ways to use the state, and people do all the time, you know, to cheat people out of. I mean, look, we talk about, this is a like super unpopular thing to talk about, although I don't really know why, because it's a big deal. We talk about eminent domain. Very few people talk about eminent domain. I mean, the Wreck-It Ralph episode that I did years ago, you know, is all about this point. Also, by the way, the Daredevil episode is a lot about eminent domain, but government is not impartial in those conditions. You know, when we talk about things like, you know, sort of, you know, eminent domain cases a lot of times they're centered around some big special interest that wants a particular tract of land and can't get it through negotiation. You know, they can't get it through making an honest offer to somebody. So instead, they go to the state and say, oh, but this land is valuable for these public works sort of reasons that are never really that. You know, it's always, you know, and sometimes, by the way, the special interest doesn't even go to government. Sometimes, like in the case of the Kelo versus New London situation, where Suzette Kelo's house was demolished, that was New London, Connecticut, literally offering Pfizer her land. And they were just like, yeah, but Pfizer, we want you to come in and we want you to build a new factory here. And we'll roll out the red carpet for you. And part of that rolling out the quote unquote red carpet was dispossessing a whole bunch of people who already lived in that area, you know, and Pfizer didn't even really care. It was like literally an offer that the government made, you know? So yeah, I mean, these kinds of things, I don't know. I mean, it's super gross to me that we can't like put the blame in the right place in that context. Cause it opened the door wide. I mean, in the movie's context, it opened the door wide for a psychopath, but like it also opens the door wide for just like regular folks who just want to benefit, you know? I don't know.
Yeah. I get real hot under the collar about eminent domain. And for whatever reason, whenever it gets brought up, there's incredible pushback, not just from government actors, but also from like other just everyday people who are like, no, we have to have eminent domain. I'm like, but why?
Yeah, I don't know.
It boggles my mind. I don't fully understand, but there you have it.
The thing is, if you look at the history of, let's say, highways and sort of things that people a lot of times talk about needing eminent domain for, where they get built, how they get built, like, first of all, it creates a whole bunch of perverse incentives to build like super highways and like these huge things that if you actually talk to urban planners, they'll say actually don't really do very, very much for traffic flow. They actually disconnect parts of your city. They create all kinds of additional problems, you know, but aside from that, like where they are built then ends up being really on top, literally on the backs of poor people, like constantly, you know, or minority groups, you know, things like that. If you look at the Daredevil episode we did, it was all about Robert Moses in New York City, you know, who was this big progressive, you know, city planner and developer and sort of the mastermind behind the, you know, a lot of the highways in New York. And he took like the poorest, blackest neighborhoods and was just like, let me just bulldoze these and put a highway here or put a park here or put a pool here. And by the way, because this was, you know, this was pre-civil rights. So this is like segregated pools. By the way, I'm going to build a pool here, but you're not allowed to go. So like, I'm going to take your neighborhood, and then I'm going to evict you from that neighborhood, and then I'm going to create a public park or a public beach that you literally can't access legally. You're prohibited. So yeah, I mean, there are horrifying examples of this. So I don't find it very persuasive that we have to give the government this kind of power. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in general.
Yeah.
But
They definitely have a good argument, falling back on it's for the greater good. We need this neighborhood that's a blight on our community because we can get more tax dollars out of this.
right,
And
because people are literally cows, cash cows, to be milked indefinitely. They're not individuals who have lives that matter, hopes and dreams or property rights of their own. We can get higher tax revenue, though. So let's get that instead. It's just gross. I mean, it's super gross.
And to bring it back to the movie, this is the same kind of mindset that our hero/villain Marla Grayson has. At the very beginning of the movie, in the very opening scene, there's a voiceover section where Marla is talking about how there are basically two kinds of people in the world, those who take and those who get taken. And she is not going to be the one who gets taken. Like, she is determined. She's been poor before and it doesn't suit her. So she's going to do whatever she can to avoid that in the future. That kind of mindset is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about, oh, it's for the greater good. Oh, it's, I will take this thing and turn it into what I want because that's what's best for reasons.
Yeah, insert whatever grandiose sounding reason you want there,
Absolutely, but it is the same kind of mentality that government agents use when they're violating people's property rights and they're initiating wars that are completely unnecessary overseas, or they're taxing us to death, or fill in the horrible thing. This is government thinking.
Yeah. And look, I know some people would listen to this and be like, you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and there are all these good things that we could do too. And not everybody's corrupt or what have you. But again, and this, for me at least, this will probably come up a lot when we get into the Maleficent section of this, because if you need this land to build a highway on, or you need it to build a power plant, or you need it to, build a train, whatever it is. If it's really that valuable to you, you should be able to make an offer that is sufficient for the people who own it, right? You should be able to do this voluntarily, and not just make an offer like here, have a bunch of cash, but sell them on it, right? Sell them on the idea that if you give up your property for this thing and be compensated for it and everything else, it will go to this wonderful, wonderful cause. Generally speaking, you don't need to force people to do great things. Now, there are going to be some people who just under any circumstance aren't going to want to give up that land, but I also don't see any reason why. America is vast, right? America is way bigger than people really realize most of the time. And not just America, I mean, literally everywhere is not nearly as inhabited as you think it is. So typically the end result of not being able to build that power plant on this area is building it in some other area and running longer lines, or, running a longer pipe system, or whatever it is, it's a pain, fine, but it's not yours. It's not your stuff. So at some point we should all be adults about this and say okay, well, I tried and I failed to convince you, but it's your property. And so that's sacrosanct. That's in the same way that I would like my property to be sacrosanct. You should, because the idea that any of these companies or government officials or whoever would do it if it was reversed, right? If I just came in and said hey, look, you've got this federal building over here, and I want it. I want that building. they're going to tell me to pound sand. Like there's no version of this where I get to just go in and be like, no, but it's mine now. And yet it works in reverse, right? Like people can come in with the auspices of government and just say, no, that's mine now. It's mine. And we should just be able to call it theft, because it's literally what it is. There's no way around it at that point. And it's the weirdest thing to me where people justify some things like that. And I do not get it, but you're right. I think Marla was she's the version of that where we can all identify that she's a criminal.
Yeah.
But it happens a lot.
If I could interject an amusing anecdote real quickly. When my husband and I were looking for a house here in Utah, we were looking at this one property, looking at some satellite images on Google Maps or whatever, and we start zooming out and we realize that this is just like a single lot that is kind of surrounded by a parking lot. We're like, huh. And then we zoom out a little bit more, and it's like the parking lot for a school. This dude would not sell his property to the government to build a school there. And so it's just like this little island of private property in this parking lot of a school. And it was amazing to me.
Look, I mean, that's going to be just by itself. It's going to be an enormous pain to deal with. But I kind of applaud that.
Yeah, but
I mean,
I respected
of course,
that.
at some point, and that's part of the thing too, is that like, if you have a long enough time preference, right, you can hold out, like if you're building a school, you're building a structure, you want to last for a long time, and somebody won't sell you that last little piece. Like, honestly, it's going to get to a point at some point. But the trick is, let them do that. Don't force it. Don't harass them. Don't send people over to bug them every day. Don't be like, whoever it was, like the construction company in Up, right? With like Carl's house, I mean, like, don't be those guys. But at some point, Carl's going to leave because it's not worth it anymore. As much as he wants it to be what it was, it's not. So he's going to need to, pull up stakes and, if not balloon his house to somewhere else, like, just move at some point, which is fine. But it's just crazy to me how much people sort of implicitly support things that they would never support if they saw it done privately. Like, you would never, none of us look at Marla's character and go like, oh yeah, she's just doing the right thing. No, of course not. She's doing horrible things. But we don't look at it from the same lens if we say that it's like the state doing those things, which I always think is very, very strange. Mm-hmm. Not really sure how we got to that point, but anyway, I'm going to say final thoughts on I Care a Lot, so we can get to our bonus section.
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay. So I Care a Lot is one of those movies that I'm really glad I watched it. I think it's an important movie. It's wonderfully acted. Like, it's got interesting dialogue. The goons are very goonish. I mean, it's not a perfect movie. But I am glad I watched it. I'm never going to watch it again.
Yeah. Paul.
I really thought this movie did a really good job of just absolutely scaring me. I can't say the word, but it was very disconcerting. The Peter Dinklage, his role, his acting ability, he needs, obviously it's Peter Dinklage, so but it doesn't matter in this context. And he is just such a great actor. And that I really enjoyed that, outside of his Bond villain death device. That
oh my god,
that part was a little bit annoying, because he just got done saying, "Why I just killed somebody and put him under a Jimmy John's," and then does this elaborate death for Marla. I say I definitely watch this. This is it's a really good movie, and I want to get your thoughts on this guy real quickly. So at the end, Marla's having her #girlboss moment, and then gets gunned down by the son of the woman she screwed over at the first part of the movie. And I wonder if the writers of the movie got some notes towards after they wrote it written and said, you can't do this. Everyone hates her. You have to kill her. And
I am almost certain that feels so much like a studio note to me. Like it just felt like. Now, granted, they did set that guy up at the beginning, so it could have always been like the final thing. But the thing is, normally if you're setting up something to be foreshadowing, you do it a couple times throughout the movie. Like we might have checked in on that guy somewhere in the middle, or we might have done something else. He is just out of the blue. It's not really Deus Ex Machina, but whatever the inverse of that is, right? Like murder ex machina or whatever. But like Satan ex machina, I'm not really sure what that would be. But in any case, man, I feel bad about that. But it's just out of nowhere. This guy just shows up
and I have never felt so happy for an on-screen death in a movie in a long time.
I felt good about it too, but it was marred by the fact that like you said, like Peter Dinklage, like he's like, all right, boys, she's tied to the chair. Now I'm going to leave while you guys handle it. And then oh my God. And then it's even worse because then they like put her, they don't kill her first. They put her in a car, passed out, and then try to make it seem like she drove off a bridge drunk. And then they don't even go over to the bridge to just check.
And like
she didn't,
just to make sure.
Just to make sure. Like, did the car not land in the water? Did it, did something else happen? Did it actually, they didn't even bother. They're the laziest, worst henchmen in the world. Man. All right.
So bad at their jobs.
Consistently bad. And that really, for me, like that also takes me out of the story because we're told that Peter Dinklage's character, Roman, is like a super, super, super dangerous guy. And then it's hard to imagine him actually being super dangerous. But that said, I was not a fan. You can watch it if you want, but it didn't do anything for me as far as like what I was hoping for it to do. So I'm going to do something different and say, if you want to watch Peter Dinklage in a great movie, watch The Station Agent. It's fantastic. It's a movie that not many people have seen. It's lovely. And Peter Dinklage is all over that movie because he's the lead and it's great. So watch that instead. That's my vote. But all right, so that will conclude this episode. So thank you everybody for watching. We're gonna, if you're a supporter on Patreon or Subscribe Star, obviously stick around. We are going to continue this conversation about evil people who are turned into heroes a little bit not more nicely in the next movie, I suppose. But we'll continue that in the next section. But for everybody else, thank you so much for watching or listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, anywhere you want to listen to it, or on YouTube. We have the YouTube version as well. And then of course, subscribe to Out of Frame, the series on YouTube, and check out our Discord. I'm pretty excited. We're as of today, and I actually think we're probably going to beat this by the time this is released, but we're real close to 500 people in our Discord. And that just keeps growing. So I'm really excited about all that. And conversations are interesting. And I'm there, Jen's there, Paul's there. We're not like mixing it up every day, but we're trying to get in there and talk to people as directly as we can. So join us there. It's totally open and we'd love to see it. So with that in mind, thank you everybody so much. And we will see you next time.